All right, well, welcome everyone. How's everyone doing today? Good, awesome. I'm glad you guys made it back for session number 2 of City University. For those of you that are just now joining us, again, my name is Bolivar Gomez, and I'm happy to serve as your official host for this program. For session 2 tonight, we have a special guest that's gonna go ahead and kick us off. It is 5:31, so you guys know me, I like to start right on time. So for tonight's special guest that'll introduce City University session 2, we have our very own Miss Michelle Franklin. And Miss Michelle Franklin, for those of you who do not know, is your St. Lucie County property appraiser. She was elected property appraiser by the voters of St. Lucie County in 2016. Ms. Franklin oversees the office's duties to determine the value of all property within the county, including improved and vacant real property, tangible personal property, and agricultural property. The office is also responsible for maintaining property ownership records and parcel ownership maps, as well as administering exemptions. So here to open up City University for session 2, please help me in welcoming your St. Lucie County property appraiser, Michelle Franklin. You're welcome.
Thank you. Well, I don't know what session 1 was like, but there's no more exciting topic than property tax assessment. So I'm going to dive right in because I know we have a limited amount of time, and I have a PowerPoint we're going to go through, and then I do actually have some trim notices. I may have seen one in the crowd, which I'm super excited. That means you opened your mail. So I want to leave time for questions if you have any. All right, 6 things to know about the property appraiser's office, okay? Main responsibilities. We value all real and tangible property. There's about 183,000 real estate parcels in St. Lucie County right now. We have about 8,000 tangible personal property. Generally, tangible personal property is business items that you can pick up and move from one business location to another. And I say generally because it also includes things like gas transmission lines, billboards, cell towers, and of course, St. Lucie County's largest tangible personal property taxpayer is FPL. Okay, that's about 60% of our tangible roll. So that is a great benefit to St. Lucie County when we speak to large taxpayers. And then we're also the official mapper of the county. And when you're in a county like St. Lucie County right now, that's a big job because the mapping of the county is changing every day. Whether that is some acreage out west of town, maybe 20 acres that they're gonna divide up now and give 5 acres to one child, 5 acres to another child, and keep 10 acres to themselves, or if it's a developer in tradition that's gonna plat 500 lots. Number 2, determining value. We determine the value on January 1 each and every year. So in our world, January 1 is pretty much the only day that matters. Whether we're talking about value or exemptions, it rotates around January 1. That is very important to remember. We do not create value. Value is created by the transactions that are happening in the marketplace. Some people think their neighbor paid too much for their home or that they got a great deal. Either way, it was paid. Whatever that amount that was paid, as long as it is an arm's length transaction, meaning equal buyer and seller, that is what the transaction, that's the marketplace. So we're reflecting that. We're gonna mirror that marketplace each and every year on January 1. We're gonna use the sales from the prior year. January 1 to December 31 of 2022 gave us a January 1, 2023 value. Property appraiser's office has the legal responsibility to study those transactions and to assess at market value. In the state of Florida, it is 100% of the fair market value. Every single year, somebody is going to make their way to me and they're gonna say, that's not fair, that's not right. In Massachusetts, we do it this way. In New York, it happens this way. In New Hampshire, that's fine in all those other states. In Florida, it is 100% of the fair market value every January 1. So my office is responsible for the tax roll, and we actually, although the county is required to house us, we answer to the state of Florida. So as an elected official, I answer to the voters of St. Lucie County to keep my job, but I answer to the state of Florida to get my tax roll and budget approved. So We don't have the city of Port St. Lucie, who's a taxing authority, the fire district, the county, anybody telling us like, hey, I think that value needs to be whatever they think, more or less. We can't do that. We're going to mirror the market. Okay. Number 3, trim notice mailed annually in August every year. So this is our time, what we call trim season for us. It is 25 days from the date we mail the notice, and we receive a peak in phone calls. What does that mean? The first week of trim, we had, I don't remember the number right off the top of my head, it was 1,200 and some odd calls. A number of people that walked into our 2 locations, one in St. Lucie West at the county courthouse, which is right behind Chick-fil-A, right? That's a marker. If I tell a restaurant, I can always get my bearings. So right behind Chick-fil-A, and then we're at the county admin complex at the corner of Virginia and 25th and Fort Pierce. So we see more walk-in traffic. We see more folks checking out the website. We do have an automated chat box on there that's able to answer some easy questions. And then, of course, we take emails and phone calls and all of that. By the second week of trim, we're in our 3rd week now, the second week of trim, we reduced down to about 750 calls. So we see that high volume during this time, which is great. We welcome it. We want your questions all year long, but especially during this time when you've received your trim notice. If you have any concerns or questions, now is the time to address those. So we'll touch more on the trim notice as we get through here. This is what the trim notice looks like. I did bring the handout so that if you don't have yours here and you're like, well, what is this about? We'll go through that briefly. But I do want to mention ad valorem versus non-ad valorem. This is a big question that we get. Top section of your trim notice is ad valorem. Ad valorem means it's related to value. Non-ad valorem in the bottom section, not related to value. So, my friend here in the blue has a $500,000 house. I have a $300,000 house. That top section, ad valorem, who's paying more in taxes? Right? He's got more value. Bottom section, non-ad valorem. Generally, what you see here is community development districts, CDDs, stormwater, solid waste, street lights maybe. There's a host of different things that you can see in the non-ad valorem. I hope did I say 300? Was that my value? I have 300. He's got 500. I forget what I use. He has $500,000 of value. Who's paying more on that non-ad valorem? Exactly the same, right? So I'm going to track with my neighbors on non-ad valorem, not necessarily on the top section on ad valorem. All right. Number 5 is exemptions and portability. Exemptions reduce the value, the assessed value of your property. The homestead exemption is what you're probably most familiar with. We actually manage over 100 different types of exemption on our tax roll. Some of those include governmental and institutionals that us as regular homeowners aren't entitled to. But there's a list on the website. If you have any questions whether you would qualify for an additional exemption, please check that out. Most of us qualify for a homestead exemption as long as it's our primary residence. That'll save you $50,000 off the assessed value. So my friend over here with the $500,000 home, he's now going to pay taxes on $450 instead of $500. That saves the average homeowner in St. Lucie County about $900 a year. More importantly than that homestead $50,000 exemption is your 3% cap that comes in the second year that you have an exemption. That 3% cap can save you thousands of dollars depending on the real estate market and how long you own the property. Okay, so that is one of the things that makes Florida unique. It's not fair in property tax assessment. We're all playing by the same rules, but depending when you purchased, how much you purchased for, and what exemptions you have, you may be paying a significantly different tax bill than your neighbor. So that's where I get a lot of, it's not fair. You're right, I admit right away, it is not fair. However, it's the rules, and the same rules apply to everybody. So in that sense, we're all equal, but we're not all the same. Number 6, most important thing, follow us on social media. That is, I'm going to get to questions. I'm going to come back to the trim, so stay with me, okay? Follow us on social media. This is where we put our updates. So if you're on social media, this year, you're like, what updates? What would I care about? Well, we're going to tell you when we mail the trim notice, and we're going to let you know about any statute changes. So this year, our widower's exemption, which was a $500 exemption, increased to a $5,000 exemption. So that went from saving a property owner about $11 a year to over $100 a year. So those are the kind of things that we put out there that you may want to know about, even if it doesn't apply to you. Maybe you have a family member or a neighbor that you can pass that along to as well. So that kind of covers that slide, or the PowerPoint. But maybe can I bug you to help me with passing those out? What I want to do is because this is so timely now with our trim notices being mailed out a couple weeks ago, is I want to just take a moment and go through this notice with you. And then any questions that you have after that, we can talk about, the trim notice questions or any property appraiser office questions that you have at all. Page 1 of the notice is the side that says, "This is not a bill, do not pay." This is where I think unfortunately, this came out in 1980, okay? And the state said, we want to make sure that property owners, because Florida is a little unique, we want to make sure that property owners understand what their property tax liability is. So they designed this notice. I tried to change a word on here. Tallahassee says, no way. So I'm so sorry that it looks like this. I feel like it's convoluted. I feel like there's a lot of columns and numbers, and it's overwhelming. Generally, I get people that open it. They say, this is not a bill, a lot of numbers, a lot of columns. I'll just set this here on my kitchen counter or my desk, and I'll have more time, and I'll look at that later, which in most people's homes, if you're like mine, that's like 6 months later when you're cleaning off the counter, and you're like, well, nothing's happened, so it must not be too important. I'll recycle that. There are 2 very important things that I want to share with you that you should check on this notice every year. Those are not on page 1, but let's go through page 1 really quick. Page 1, do not pay. You want to make sure that you're going to have your owner information, what the property address is for those people that own multiple properties. The mailing address is the same, but maybe not the location address, so you check that. Column 1 is the taxing authority that you are paying taxes to for this particular property. We have 24 taxing authorities in St. Lucie County. If you're paying taxes to the city of Port St. Lucie, you're not paying to the city of Fort Pierce, right? So nobody's gonna have 24 on their list. But this is everyone that's applicable to your property, this particular property. Column 2 is what the rate was last year. Last year's budgeted rate. Those rates do change every year, or not. It depends. So those taxing authorities are going to decide each and every year. That's where you can compare last year's rate to what this year's rate is proposed. The middle column is what was kind of known as a rollback rate back in the day. The green column is the recommended budget. Generally speaking, for these taxing authorities, it is going to be this green column. It cannot be more than this green column. That's the max. It can be less than that. In my experience, and I've been with the office for 20 years, I've seen it happen a very small handful of times, and it happened when a very large number of people from the public showed up at the very last column, those budget hearing dates and times. And they raised Cain. And there was changes. But it cannot be more than that green column. Okay? Does that make sense with everybody? Then we get down to the non-ad valorem. Now we all know that non-ad valorem is not related to value. Those are a set amount depending upon who, whichever, whether it's a CDD or solid waste or streetlights or whatever the amount, whoever the authority is there. We provide that to you as a service. That's not required. I go out of my way, staff and I, to try to reach out and contact everybody to confirm what non-ad valorem assessments are going to be on your property, because I feel like if I'm looking at this and I say, okay, I've got $250 in here in non-ad valorem assessments, great, got that. But what I didn't realize, I'm in tradition and I have a CDD of $1,200, That change, I mean, a $1,200 change to my tax bill is real money. So we make every effort to add every single one of the non-ad valorems there just to give you an accurate idea of what you're going to see on your November tax bill that's mailed out by the tax collector's office. People every year will tell me, I wrote you my check, I paid my taxes, you did not write me a check. I don't have anything to do with collection of taxes. If you don't pay, I'm A-okay with that. Chris Kraft, the tax collector, has different thoughts, but that's his thoughts. All right, page 2. This is where all my love is, because this is the property appraiser's office page. These are the things that we oversee in the office, exemptions and value. So when they say, can you do something about this? Can I do something about page 1, that's taxes? No. Can I do something about page 2, value or exemptions? Possibly. Top right in yellow, fair market value this year. Every single year when you get your trim notice, that's the first thing you want to check. Remember, there's 2 things. That's one of them. Yellow box, fair market value. Do I agree with that for January 1 of this year? It's kind of hard to think back, too, because we're in August or September, and you're receiving a notice that we're talking about from January. But you kind of got to go back in time and say, is January 1, is this what I thought my property was worth for tax purposes only? Okay, 100% of the fair market value for tax purposes. Then we move down. That gives you kind of last year, this year, important stuff, but more important, we're going to keep moving down. Purple section, portability. So how many of you have heard of portability? Okay, a few. Excellent. What is portability? The ability to take your tax savings from one homesteaded property anywhere in the state of Florida to another homesteaded property anywhere in the state of Florida. How do I come up with portability? The difference between my assessed value and my taxable value. Okay, so how do I know what that is? Super easy. You look on your trim notice in the purple box, that's your amount. That's the amount. So my friend that has a $500,000 house, he's lived in it for several years. He actually has a tax savings of $200,000. His purple box says $200,000. He's moving on, decided he's moving up to Jacksonville, found this wonderful home in Jacksonville, $800,000 that he's buying. So he's got a little extra cash he wants to put into real estate. He's immediately taken his new $800,000 house and minusing 2, right? So we're down to 6, and then he's going to get his homestead exemption, so we're going to take another 5. So now he's paying taxes on $550 versus the 8. Does that kind of make sense with everybody? So portability can be very interesting. You take the full amount with you when you go greater in value. We call it upsizing, but it does not matter if it's larger. It just matters if it's more valuable property. If you're moving to a more valuable property, you're going to take your full benefit. If you're moving to a less valuable property because you're going to downsize, I'm moving from my $500,000 house to a small condo because I don't want to take care of the lawn anymore, then you're going to take a portion of that savings with you. So I had $200,000 in the purple box. I'm going to take a portion of that. How do I know what the portion is? Call us. Everybody in here that lives at a different address, so if there's 2 of you living at the same address, but everybody else has a different portability amount. So it's not something that we can blanket easy, share that. Call us. We're here to help you. So if you know your exact address, I'm moving from 123 Main Street to 123 Port St. Lucie Boulevard, we can tell you exact numbers. If you say I'm coming from Broward County, we can work with Broward County's website to try to figure out, we think you have roughly this amount. You're going to 123 Main Street here in Port St. Lucie, that house value is this, it's roughly gonna create this kind of tax bill for you. We are happy to help you through that. So please, if you think you're moving, if you're tossing around the idea, call us, we'll help you walk through that and what that looks like. Next section is the blue section, exemptions, and that is the number 2 thing that I want you to check every year when you open this notice in August. First one was value, second one is your exemptions. But Michelle, my exemption was there, nothing changed, where would my exemption go? 9 3/4 of the time out of 10, it's not going anywhere. But every now and again, I get somebody that makes their way to me and they say, nothing changed, but my exemption is gone. Nothing? You didn't file any new deed? No, no, no. The first thing I do is pop up their address and I say, looks like you filed a new deed. No, no, no. You put your property into a trust. Well, yeah, I put my property into a trust, which causes a new deed, which means that you may lose your exemption. So know if you are going to do some estate planning, know if you are getting married and adding a spouse, if you're divorcing and leaving a spouse, if you're going to add a child for estate planning, you're putting that property into a trust, any of those things can impact an exemption. Again, the $50,000 is important, but more than that is that 3% cap that's been on your property for several years in a rising real estate market. So call us to find out. Hopefully, if you're just putting your property into a trust, and even marriage, and sometimes, most of the time it's okay and you can continue your cap, but call us ahead of time. If you forget to call us, you forget that you put your property into a trust because a lot of things were happening at that time. I understand. That's why you're always going to double check this notice. Because if we know this and you just put your property into a trust, but you still have title of that property before September 12th, that yellow date that's listed, we can fix it for this year. Once this information goes over to the tax collector's office and it's November 1, it's out of my hands and it goes to Tallahassee. And they, in my experience, they don't have a bleeding heart. They kind of say, too bad. Folks knew the deadline to file was March 1. There's nothing we can do to fix it now. So you want to check this every single year because this is the time, if something happened, we can correct it. Okay? So that's why it's really important. This can change thousands of dollars. I've seen significant changes due to caps coming off of property when the cap really didn't have to come back. We find out a year later, year and a half down the road, I can't go back and fix last year. So you move forward from there, and that hurts my heart. So please check every year the blue section. Okay, I don't know how I did on time. I know because I threw that in, but I know we have questions. So the only disclaimer with questions is that I apologize. I'm super hard of hearing. Even though I wear hearing aids, I cannot hear. So you have to yell at me, and I'm going to walk out to you when you have a question so I can actually hear it. So I think you had one.
Yeah, I have a mic here too. And really, yeah, I have a mic here. I'll pass this around here. Really quickly before we pass around the mic, I just want to also mention that we are also recording this session for future individuals that want to watch the City University program online. So just keep that in mind when you're asking your questions. You can certainly still ask your question, but I just wanted to give you guys a heads up on that.
Well, he didn't let me know that before. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
I have a few questions.
Okay.
First one, you mentioned TRIM. What's TRIM? Is that an acronym?
Great question. What is TRIM? Truth in Millage. And I apologize. I should have led with that. But that was, like I said, back in 1980, they said, we want property owners to understand what a millage rate is and what rate is happening. As I understand it, I wasn't there in 1980, but these taxing authorities can kind of make some rate changes, and at that time, they had a greater ability to make changes, and so there was some craziness going on year to year, and so that's where these letters came from. We're going to make sure that this notice is out there so it's easily explainable to the property owner what the taxing authorities are doing.
Okay. You mentioned mill rate. I was comparing last year to this year. Some items stay the same, others go up slightly, and some go down slightly. Why the change?
That is a great question. I think, is your OMB person coming? Hi. That's a great question for this lovely lady that's coming up. So remember, I'm on this side, value and exemptions. This side is all of our taxing authorities.
Well, that kills my third question.
So yeah, no, she's gonna give you a better answer than I will, because that has to do with the city budget.
Okay. I do have another question. You said September 12th is the deadline. If I bought my house December the 31st, I didn't know about September 12th.
Yeah, so this is only the deadline if you have concerns about the information on this notice. If you disagreed with your value, or with the exemption status, you have until September 12th to file a formal appeal. So that's the only thing that this deadline is for. It's to file a formal appeal. Now, I will tell you, again, we want you to open this information. We want you to call us. If for some reason you didn't call us at this time and it was, September 20th, call us anyway. Because if there is ever something I can do to fix it or help a taxpayer in our county, I will do it. I promise you. So whenever it is, back in the day, you could file for homestead from January to March. That's crazy. We don't do that anymore. We file all year long because we want to make it as easy for you as we can. So call us, but yet this is technically a hard deadline if you disagree with value or exemptions and you want to go through a formal process to talk to an independent third party and state your case. But what I tell people is please come to us first. I promise I know about 183,000 parcels in St. Lucie County better than you do, but you know your house better than I do. So you may share information. I have a gentleman I just spoke with today. He's out west of town, and I did not know that a portion of his property was being used by his neighbors to get access to their property. Well, I can change that value based on that information. So sometimes there's things that people can share with me, or I can share with them. I've had somebody else who I spoke to earlier this week, and they're like, there's no way, my neighborhood, the sales, there's absolutely no way. I'm like, okay, well, let's look it up. So we use our GIS information of the sales within 3 miles. I just did 3 miles of his property. He's like, there's no way. I'm like, yeah, that's what they sold for. So he just had no idea of the sales prices that were happening in his neighborhood. So once I showed him that map, he's like, I probably am doing okay, aren't I? I'm like, yeah, I wouldn't say anything. So, that we can do the information exchange. We may get to that point in information exchange and you say, no, I'm dead set. And every year we have people that say, the value is too low. You have to increase my value.
No.
Why are they doing that? They're leaving and they want to take they want to take more portability with them to the next. They want to increase that purple box. And so I can't do that because I'm not going to do that to the next homeowner that's going to pay that tax bill. I can't give a better benefit over here because I know that you're leaving and you want to take that with you. And the new homeowner's, stuck at a new $500,000 value when really we thought it was $400,000. That's just not right. So we're going to be as accurate as possible. And we're gonna look at it. We're gonna look at all the sales. Now we're gonna make adjustments. Some people have a pool, some people don't. You may have 3-car garage. You may have a screened-in porch. You may have, there's all the different things, right? Metal roofs, shingles. We take all these things into consideration. We may have a very complex construction home, Tesoro, versus a, GDC home that was built in the 60s on. Why am I forgetting the street? Prima Vista. Thank you. I was like, where am I? So we wouldn't compare those. We'll make adjustments.
So the market value, that's not an average of all the homes.
No, it is within a area that is close to your property. So some of those areas that we look at may be a couple miles. Some may be 25 miles. It kind of varies. It depends on the type of property. When we look at our commercial, we even go to other counties with some of our commercial properties. But generally in Port St. Lucie, if you live in a gated neighborhood, it's in the gated neighborhood. But if you're somewhere else, you're in Torino, you're going to be within that Torino, the southern Torino area or the northern Torino area, because even within Torino, we have a couple of different value areas.
Are you comparing, let's say, a 3-bedroom house versus a 2-bedroom house?
Bedroom counts don't really matter. I know that sounds ridiculous, but it's square footage. So depending on your square footage, if you have 3 bedrooms in it or 4 bedrooms, I don't care. And we make every effort to get that correct, but oftentimes people will call and say, on your website, I'm actually listed as a 3-bedroom, but I'm a 4. Great, send an email, we'll correct it. And I do get this question a lot too. When you came by to take photos, it was Christmas time or it was garbage day. You want a new photo, snap a photo, email it to me, we'll change it. I have no challenge with that at all.
Good to know. I see some hand raised.
Couple in the back.
I'll make my way back there. Give me one moment.
Are you running back or me?
I'll run back there.
Thank you for the questions. I get very excited, as you can tell, with questions.
Yes, my question is kind of naive because I'm not too sure how to ask it, but I sold some land in another county, and my client asked me about portability, so I called that county to ask about the portability, and it is for land, and she did say that portability does apply for land, even if it's an investment property.
Let me go back to the mic so everybody hears this. So every property in the state of Florida has a cap, okay? You have a 3% cap if you have homestead, and that 3% homesteaded cap is portable. If you do not have homestead, vacant land, industrial, commercial, second home, whatever it is, if it doesn't have a 3% cap, it has a 10% cap. The 10% caps are not portable. Those are there for that particular owner for that moment in time. If there is a change made, even if it's the same owner and they put their property into an LLC, or they add somebody, they make any kind of change, then they will reset that 10% cap. There is no portability on the 10% side, only on the 3% side. Now remember too, when we talk about portability, you have 2 January 1s. So if you leave your first homestead, and we leave today, September, think of what year and month we are, September of 2023, we sell that property, we can miss January 1, 2024, we can miss January 1, 2025, but by December 31, 2025, I'm in my new homestead because I'm filing for January 1, 2026. Only 2 January 1s in order to port. After that amount of time, you have no portability. Again, you can go anywhere in the state of Florida, from anywhere to anywhere in the state of Florida, but you only have 2 January 1s to do it.
Great, thank you. We have one more question here in the back as well.
Okay, I'm going to try to be quick. I have a first, very specific question.
Okay.
I just moved into a new house in Port St. Lucie. It was a new build.
Congrats.
Thanks. And I just got a bill from FCC Environmental. Are you aware of this? Because I called today, and they got this. Somebody else got the call. They sent me a separate bill saying it wasn't going to be put in my property tax yet.
Because you moved in halfway through the year?
I moved in July.
So they're probably trying to cover from July, because remember, we pay taxes in arrears.
Right.
So they probably, I don't know how.
They're telling me it's for July, August, September, but also for the upcoming year as well. They're telling me I have to pay it in advance for October through September of next year. And I told them, I called them today, and I said, the letter you sent me looks a little scammy. When you shouldn't just send this to people with no explanation. It literally says Portal Solutions or something like that. And there's literally no explanation, and they're asking me for $456.
I'll touch base with you before I leave and see if it makes sense to me that they would bill you for a partial year.
Yeah.
That tracks. But prepaying, that part doesn't seem right to me, but that's not my,
Okay.
that's not under my umbrella of value and exemptions, but I'll see if I can't help you with that.
Okay. And the other thing I just want to know, what do you mean by 3% cap? Maybe you explained it, but I didn't hear it.
Say it one more time.
Sorry.
It's okay.
What do you mean by 3%?
Oh, 3%.
Yeah.
So homestead is 2-part. First part is your $50,000 exemption.
Yeah.
The second year, because your first year is your foundation, right? So I move in, this is where I set my cap from. The 3% cap means that your assessed value cannot increase more than 3% in any tax year.
Okay.
Okay? And that, for us right now in St. Lucie County, in this time, that is the most valuable part of the exemption.
Okay.
Because that 3% cap, when we're looking at City of Port St. Lucie, went up double digits. I mean, we saw a 20% property increase. So instead of paying taxes on a 20% increase, you're paying taxes on a 3% increase.
Okay.
Generally, over time, it's not even always 3%. Some years we were paying on 1%, 1.5%. It depends on the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, that's set by the state every year, and they let us know. But it is a second benefit of the homestead, and honestly, the greater benefit is your 3% cap. And that 3% cap is what the portability is.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Do we have any more questions?
Questions?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
I'm going to give you the mic here. Go ahead.
What percentage of the taxes you pay go to the city and what goes to the county?
Is the city going to address that? Yeah, we can answer that question. Again, sorry, value and exemptions, when you get to the taxing authorities and tax rates and percentages, I leave that to the professionals there. Yeah. All right. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate your attention. Thank you, thank you. If there's just one thing I could make sure, if you heard nothing else tonight, this one thing that I want you to hear is that we're here to serve you. So if you have questions regarding value and exemptions, please, please, please call us, whether it's, again, to file or something you're gonna make a change to your deed or just general what ifs, please call us. We're happy to talk through that with you, okay? Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Michelle. I always like hearing Michelle speak because I always feel like I learned something new. We're going to go ahead and transition to the next PowerPoint. Give me just one moment here. All right, so this is a nice transition to our next group of speakers here. So we actually just finished, the city recently finished its budget for the upcoming fiscal year, which is fiscal year 2023-2024. So as part of that, we actually have our Office of Management and Budget office, which is here today. And for those of you who are not aware of what OMB actually does, OMB provides oversight for the total budget function in the city. The department assists the management team and city council in the budgetary process, starting with the development of the annual budget and the adoption under the state trim requirements. So here to kick us off, we have our budget manager, Miss Ivy Ladko, that'll talk a little bit about the OMB functions and then hopefully address some of the questions that came up during Michelle's presentation also. Welcome, Ivy.
Hello, City University students. My name is Ivy Ladko. I've actually been with the city since 1986. So that's working on my 8th year in January. So I started the city when I was 4. Okay, I just want to get this right. So what do we do in the Office of Management and Budget? So we're responsible for assisting the city manager with developing the budget. So we project the revenues for the upcoming fiscal year to determine the resources available for spending for all the expenditures. So the OMB, we also monitor and forecast all the revenues and expenses in the current year. We basically forecast to see if we're going to exceed our revenue projections or be within budget. If we're not within budget, we have to process a budget amendment. And that's where we recommend the budget amendment throughout the year. We usually have 2 budget amendments, and we do it. If we have a hurricane, guess what? We're going to need a budget amendment. So budget objectives. What is a budget? How is a budget developed? How is it legally adopted? Can a budget be modified, and how? We're going to talk about city council policies, revenue and expenditures, and the property tax millage rate. And if you can see on the side, that's our budget in brief. Christine that works in our office, she's going to pass them out. I don't have enough to go around the room, so I'm going to go back upstairs and print them and bring some down and put it on the back table if you don't get them. So what is a budget? So we all have a personal budget, right? We have to stick to it. So with the city, it's a policy document. We have guidelines on how to carry out the operation of the city. It has to tie to our strategic plan, our council priorities, and our goals and objectives. It's also a financial plan. There's a lot of data in the budget document. There's every single line item for revenues, and there's a ton of line items for all of our expenditures that tie to all of the funds that we have within the city. It's also an operations guide. We have different functions of each department. We have different programs, and all your staffing is in the budget. It's also a communications device. It tells a story. It tells a story what we're going to do throughout the year. So if our budget is online, you can go on to the City of Port St. Lucie website under budget, and our budget is over, the proposed budget, I think it's around 718 pages worth of just different documents in there. So November through December, we look at the current levels of services. We, as I said before, we project revenues and expenditures. We forecast those. We prepare long-range models. In December through March, we start preparing our capital budget. March through April, the city manager reviews the capital budget. The city manager reviews every single item. If he doesn't think it's needs to be done in the upcoming year, he'll postpone it and push it out. But he makes every decision before it goes to city council. January through April, the departments start inputting their operating data into our system and requesting their operating information. May through June, the city manager starts reviewing their requests. And then we go ahead and we start meeting with those departments. And again, we prepare these spreadsheets that the city manager reviews every single line item, every single request. He has to sign off on everything. And he does. He looks at the percentage increase, whether it's decreasing or increase. If it's a 4% increase, there's a note in there. We have to explain everything. In September, the city council, so those are your two meetings in September. It's going to be on September 11th at 6 o'clock, and then September 25th at 6 o'clock. So the city council will adopt those ordinances for the millage rate and the total budget and the CIP resolution. That takes one meeting. So the tentative tax rate, how is a budget legally adopted? The tentative tax rate and public hearing dates must be approved, set by council. That's done at our July workshop. The property appraiser, so Michelle Franklin, she mentioned trim notices. So trim is truth in millage, and it's a Florida statute that all cities and counties need to follow. So it's statutory requirements that we put our millage rate on there, the dates and times of our meetings. So we're following those requirements. If we don't, we're in trouble if we don't notify the public, if we don't notify the residents. So in August, we prepare a budget summary ad that already hit in August. It was in the newspaper. The trim ads, again, it's a requirement by the Florida statutes. And then we have the two public hearings. So can a budget be modified? Yes, it can. So if we have an emergency, or if, say, a project is budgeted for $2 million, and we've had inflation, so some of our projects have come in like at 60% higher. And I know that's a lot of money, so we have to go back and, like, is that another $1.2 million that we have to go in and modify the budget? And that has to go to council for 2 readings. It's called a budget amendment. So guidelines for developing the budget. So we have to consider cost increases, our tax rate, which is our millage. So we estimate that early on, so that's part of our revenue. Staffing levels, our financial contingency level. So there's different contingencies and different funds. In the general fund, it's 20%. In some of our other non-major funds, it's 17%. In the building department, it's 50%. And then we also have to take into consideration other fees and rates, which is street lighting, stormwater, our utility rate increases. And that will all be discussed at, I think there's some meetings, I'm not sure of the date as far as like the stormwater rates, but we'll discuss the millage increase on September 11th and the 25th. So our total budget for where does the money come from and where does the money go? Our total budget for our proposed budget is roughly $705 million. So our revenue sources are our tax money, our franchise fees, our charges for services, the fund transfers, and then where does our money go? It goes to utilities, it goes to our stormwater fund, our road and bridge operating fund, our general fund, which houses the police department. It goes to administrative funds, the building department, and our CIP, which is, I think, roughly 358 over a 5-year plan. So 19% of our budget is capital, and the other is 81% is operating, which again, that's the police department, our finance department, O&B, our city clerk. So since fiscal year 15-16, our millage rate was at a high of 6.6289, and we're proposing in September that it be lowered to 5.20. So I believe that is, I think it's a 1.48 mil of a decrease. And when we talk about like 1 mil, so that's $1 per every 1,000 of value. So if you have a $200,000 home, and I'm not going to take into consideration like tax exemptions, you would pay $200 for that $200,000 for 1 mil. And here's an example of in 15-16, if the value of the property is $221.661, and with a homestead exemption of $50,000, your taxable amount would be $171,661 times the city's millage. Now that's just the city portion of your tax bill. It's not St. Lucie County, it's not the fire district, that's just our portion. You would be paying $892.63. But if we didn't reduce that millage and we kept it at 6.6289, you'd be paying $1,137.92. So you have saved over 8 years $245 if we didn't reduce the millage rate. And that's one of the city council's, that's their strategic goal, is to reduce that millage rate. So here's an example of a bill from 22-23, and the value of this bill is $194,000, and you can see that the total millage at the bottom is 23 mills, and we've got arrows showing you where the city of Port St. Lucie is. This mill is based on 5.30, so you can see what the city collected over to the right, the taxes that are levied. And then the total tax bill for this value would be roughly $3,500. But that doesn't all go to the city. There's other taxing authorities within this bill. And our last slide, so this is a new tool that we're implementing. It's called Balancing Act. and it gives you a tax receipt to show you where your dollars are spent. So if you go to Christine, I don't know if she's handed out the card yet. You did. So if you look at the card, and if you go to the City of Port St. Lucie /taxes, and then you can look up your tax bill, or you can put a value in there, but it's going to give you a receipt of where your taxes are spent. And so, do you have any questions for me?
I have a question.
There you go. Go ahead.
I'm looking at my tax bill, and it says do not pay. Thank you.
So you're going to have to talk to the tax collector over there.
The mill rates, and they're different from last year, and I don't see the total of 5.2, you said?
So last year, the City of Port St. Lucie was 5.30. The overall millage was 23.0004, I believe. So that's what the overall total millage was last year. So just depending on every taxing authority, like we reduced our millage by 1/10 of a mil. So it's going to go from 5.3 to 5.2. I can only really talk about the City of Port St. Lucie because we're just one taxing authority on there.
Now, I have a question on the non-ad valorem, the CDD,
Yes, so
Verano Center District.
so they're community development districts, and so you're gonna find those out in tradition because they had to build the roads, the infrastructure. What they do is they bond all of that, and then they pass the cost back to the taxpayer. So somebody that's in, probably, they're not in a, like a gated community in tradition, and I don't know necessarily, I don't know if somebody built an apartment building out there, they still would be charged that CDD. It doesn't mean that, I think pretty much everything over there is in gated communities, and also River Place, that's not gated, I think they also have a CDD, which is off of 25th Street. So they're passing off the debt to the taxpayer or to whoever bought that home.
I was told that some developers do not have the CDD.
Yes, so,
They even make it a plus to buy their homes versus
right, so,
why some do and some don't.
The people in the apartments do pay, but it also helps with the amenities, so they're allowed to use those amenities as well.
okay, so yeah, so I don't know. I would assume that whoever owns the building it would be passed along with the rent or whatever. You'd have to own the house to pay the CDD.
And for how long is this CDC in place?
You would have, so sir, you would have to call the number that's associated. So by every single millage or by the non-ad valorem, there's a phone number associated with what you pay. So if you're paying a CDD, you would want to call them. It could be, if they just developed it, it could be 30 years. I mean, more than likely, it's 30 years that they pass it along to you. But you can call them and ask them. Or you could probably call our finance department and find out what the CD, how much, how long the bond is.
And the last question I have is the waste. Last year it was $251, and now it's $432. Twice the cost for half pickup. I don't get it.
Right,
I
so.
don't get it.
So, we went to a new trash
Right.
hauler, so, and Marianne I think she's in the audience, she might be able to talk to you more about it, but we did give you a $36.76 credit, a one-time credit last year. So now we have to incorporate that credit that we gave you back into the cost, and then we have to increase it contractually by 4%. But if you, I don't know if there's going to be a session on basically our garbage, but you might want to wait until that session to ask those questions.
Yeah, there will be.
Okay,
I believe during session number 4.
session number 4.
Does anybody on the left-hand side of the room have any questions? We've been mostly on the right-hand side, but anybody over here want to ask a question? No? Nobody? Right-hand side, anybody over here that would like to ask a question? No? All right. Well, I think you're off the hook here.
All right, well, thank you. I
you.
appreciate your time.
So we are going to go ahead and still stick with our OMB office, and now we're going to go ahead and transition to our second half, which Nathan Rubel will go ahead and take over from here. Welcome, Nate.
Thank you, Bolivar.
You're welcome.
Good evening, City University. Nate Rubel, Assistant Procurement Director here at the City of Port St. Lucie. The procurement office is housed in the Office of Management and Budget, so we've kind of tag team here tonight to tell you about both parts of our office. So now we'll transition to the procurement management division portion of the Office of Management and Budget. Basically, procurement is purchasing, buying things. So we're responsible for purchasing commodities, equipment, professional and construction services necessary for city operations. The procurement division strives to provide a purchasing system that ensures integrity and fairness, provides centralized responsibility for bids, formal solicitations, vendor selection, contract negotiations, contract management duties, and we also handle surplus property. That's getting rid of things like vehicles or real estate. And then we also provide emergency logistical support to the city. In the aftermath of like a hurricane or something, we're part of that emergency response team as well. Because oftentimes we need to acquire goods or services to recover from the disaster. So we got some objectives to go over. We'll go over what is public procurement, how does public procurement operate in the city, how do we procure our commodities, goods, and services. You may be wondering, well, how do we acquire these things? Do we bid everything? And for the things we do bid, how do we prepare and go through that bid process? And then I can give you some guidance on how to find more information about procurement function here at the city. So what is public procurement? The basic goal of public procurement is basically we try to test the market to find the optimum response for the solutions that we need at a fair and reasonable price, and we try to be able to acquire the goods and services that are needed when they are needed. But we also have to keep in mind serving the long-term interests of the city by helping to manage the city's risk. We can do this by having formal agreements in place that also include insurance requirements. So we're contracting with responsible contractors that have the financial wherewithal to provide the city the goods and services. Public procurement can also accomplish some socioeconomic objectives. One example of that would be in our procurement ordinance, we do have like a local vendor preference policy when it comes to awarding bids and requests for proposals. But moreover, we try to maximize competition and maintain a process that is high in integrity. So you may wonder, or maybe not, is the procurement function centralized or decentralized in the city? Centralized meaning, does the procurement office handle the purchasing of all goods and services? Decentralized meaning, do the departments buy all the goods and services they need? Well, in practice, it's a combination of both. So for purchases at lower dollar thresholds, the departments handle those. When they exceed those formal thresholds, the central procurement office takes over and handles the procurement process for those purchases. So how do we procure? So we have certain payment methods and procurement methods. Payment methods would be purchase orders, often known as POs, credit cards or P cards, direct billing. We have in our financial system, we have the ability to set up contracts, and we can invoice directly to those contracts in our system. And then there's payment requests. We call them internally like requests for checks. That payment method is utilized for things that really don't need to go through the procurement office, like reimbursing an employee for their travel expenses. They would just request a check or to be reimbursed for that. That doesn't really require procurement activity. So then, for those of you maybe in the business community wondering, well, how, or just citizens, concerned citizens, well, how do we go about purchasing here at the city? For small purchases, those would be items less than $10,000. The departments are responsible for obtaining quotes. At that low dollar, they're just required to get one written quote. They can get more quotes, of course, if they choose, and that helps speed up the process and keep things moving. When we get to a little larger purchasing threshold, from $10,000 to less than $75,000 for goods and services, we require the departments to obtain 3 written quotes. Now, when we have purchases for products and services that are $75,000 or greater, that is when we enter into our formal selection process, where we issue a formal bid or a request for proposal. Now, that covers everything except construction. So for construction, the city's ordinance has some different thresholds. For informal construction projects, that threshold actually goes up to less than $200,000. So the 3 written quotes are required still from that $10,000 to less than $200,000 for construction projects. And then for construction projects of $200,000 or greater, we issue formal bids for those. The significance of that $200,000 mark is the statutes require us to obtain payment and performance bonds for construction projects in excess of $200,000. When we have the requirement for payment and performance bonds, it's a lot easier for the central procurement office to handle the procurement process, the selection process, and then the contract management process for those projects. So you may wonder, do we formally bid everything we buy? Well, the quick answer is no. Everything we buy over those thresholds. The quick answer is no. There's a few other common procurement methods that we utilize when a formal bid may not be appropriate. Some of you may have heard of the term called piggybacking or cooperative contracting. Basically, that is when we utilize another government agency's contract and purchase the same goods or services. The term piggyback means we're actually piggybacking on the competitive process that they have already conducted. They've already conducted a formal bid or a request for proposal through a similar process we would have used and made a selection in a similar manner we would have through open competition. It saves us a lot of time and resources. If we utilize our own staff to formally solicit everything we buy, we would need to increase our staffing. And I'm not sure about the benefit we would get from that. Oftentimes we do piggyback contracts because we're able to take advantage of greater economies of scale. If a vendor knows, there's certain contracts that contractors know that are widely used throughout the region or the state by all sorts of government agencies. They price those, they provide favorable pricing on those contracts. So we're oftentimes able to take advantage of greater economies of scale and get lower pricing for some of the goods and services. And then there's also cooperatives. There's certain agencies nationwide that are established for the primary purpose of issuing formal solicitations for government agencies to use. Sometimes the cooperative themselves will issue that. Other times these cooperatives are set up where they utilize another government agency, like the city of Port St. Lucie, to issue the formal solicitation. So we utilize those contracts as well. of course, an emergency procurement would be, in a situation, we would be one where we wouldn't have time to go through a formal selection process. Think of if like a water main broke out on Port St. Lucie Boulevard. We wouldn't have time to write up a scope of work and put plans together and put a bid out there for, a few weeks to then repair the road. You want the roadway, for public safety purposes, repaired as quickly as possible. While we can have emergency contracts in place, there might be other things that we need to acquire to remedy that situation. We just wouldn't have the time to go through a formal competitive process for that. But with the emergency purchases, we document those, and when they exceed those thresholds, we bring those to council after the fact to get that emergency purchase ratified by council. There's also something known as single sourcing or sole sourcing. That's when there's really only one source to acquire the goods or services we need. One common example I give is at our water plant. So the utilities, the water plant produces the drinking water. So at the water plant, they may have certain pumps or other equipment that is utilized for certain applications. In order to make the plant run more efficiently, they might standardize on, say, a particular pump brand so we can have spare pumps and spare parts on the shelf. So if a pump were to go down, it would minimize the downtime at the water plant. You probably won't even know that a pump went out because we can pull it off the shelf, put it in. But oftentimes with that determination that we're going to standardize, we would standardize on a brand XYZ pump. Well, XYZ pumps would tell us in order to maintain our warranty on our equipment, we need to utilize their authorized dealer to buy parts and to have them service our equipment in order to not void warranties. So that would be an instance where, because of that standardization decision to help the water plant run efficiently, we would only be able to buy and service that equipment from one provider. That's a common example. There's also other exemptions from competition. We have some in the city's code of ordinances, and then the Florida statutes has a list of them. Like two common examples that I'm sure you can relate to would be like postage stamps. We mail things out. You can't buy stamps from anybody but the United States Postal Service. So why would we do a bid to buy stamps when we can only buy them from one place? Another example would be your electricity. We're in Florida Power and Light Service District. We can't bid out our electricity service. We have to purchase power from Florida Power and Light, so no need to do a formal solicitation to buy electricity. And so there's other examples like that that would be exempt from competition. So the projects we do formally solicit, how do we prepare our bids? What kind of process do we go through? So we hear from the departments. The city has, I'm not sure what the number is, 19, 20 departments, police, solid waste, finance, parks and rec, utilities, public works. They're in charge of, managing their day-to-day operations, and they would identify needs that they have and communicate those to us. So they would identify that need, communicate that need to us, and send us information about the products or services they need to acquire. We will work with the department to help them prepare a scope of work, and then we will also prepare the formal solicitation documents, which will contain the city's standard terms and conditions, like insurance requirements and other things that the city attorney's office says that we need according to law. And then we would get that approved by the city attorney's office, our risk management office, which would establish the insurance requirements, and then the requesting department would sign off on that as well. Then we would issue the solicitation. We utilize an electronic bidding system known as DemandStar, and we would post those formal bidding opportunities to DemandStar. There is also a list on our website, but that will link you to the DemandStar website. That solicitation will normally be out on the street for 21 to 45 days, 28 to 30 day time period is most common for qualified businesses to be given an opportunity to respond to that bid or request for proposal. When that time period expires, the bids are due. They submit those through our electronic bidding system, and then we would download those and evaluate those. When we issue a basic invitation to bid, that evaluation is going to be how well can they provide the goods or service we need, but that's going to be based on primarily price or best value if there's other factors that, other than price that we would consider. When we issue a request for proposals, that's when we're asking the contractors to give us some more ideas on how to what solutions they have to our needs. And then we would go through a bit more of an elaborate evaluation process where we might have an evaluation committee established, which would then meet in a publicly noticed meeting where they would discuss the proposals and score them and rank them, and then based on the rankings, make a recommendation of award. Once we get a recommendation of award, either on a low bid, usually price for a bid, or the highest ranked firm for a request for proposal process, we will go through an award process, we'll notify them of that award, and then we'll enter a contract negotiation phase. With all of our solicitation documents, we send out a draft contract, so anybody responding to our bids, they should know the terms and conditions that they will have to agree to up front. So oftentimes that contract negotiation process doesn't take too long. Sometimes there's some more complex projects that do require some back and forth to negotiate and iron out the details of a contract. Once we get those details ironed out, that's when you'll see those items placed on a council agenda for approval by the city council. So that's how the bid process goes here. And then I think this is my last slide. So if you're interested in finding out more information about procurement operations at the city, I'm not sure if Bolivar provides you with electronic versions of the presentations. I've created an active hyperlink there, but if not, you go to the city's website, www.cityofpsl.com. You'll see that government tab there, and then there's a drop down will come down and it'll say departments, and you can find us either in the Office of Management and Budget or Procurement. I think they're both listed there. And then there's more information such as the projects we have out to bid, our policy and procedure manual, and then some other resources, I think contact information as well. So I think with that, that concludes that presentation. Any questions on procurement here at the city? Yes, sir.
Steve, I ask this question again. The solid waste proposal, did that go through your department
Yes.
and followed the steps that you outlined?
We had to follow a modified process just due to the situation that the city of Port St. Lucie was going through. So we had been notified, and I think Mariana will go through this in 2 weeks a bit more. Are you going to go through anything with how we got FCC under contract, or no? Just going to, okay, well then I'll try and provide you a brief overview of that. So Waste Pro was our contractor at that time, and we had performance issues with them, and they had notified us that they were going to terminate the contract by, I think, September of last year. And we were told this early in 2022, although we were trying to negotiate with them. I don't know I wasn't in on those negotiations with the details, but it came to, we figured out, holy cow, they're going to be terminating the contract, and I don't know if we want to continue with the poor service we were getting because they were missing pickups. You know, you were talking about twice a week service going to once a week service. Well, I'm sure a lot of us in this room probably weren't getting twice a week service because they were not fulfilling their obligations. So needless to say, we had to see if we could test the market to see if we could find a replacement solid waste hauler. Because we were, as more and more time went by, we were, being painted into a corner on what we could do. Would we, if we had time to go see if the market had some other contractors that were interested, maybe we could find a new contractor. We didn't want ourselves to be in a position where we had to give in to Waste Pro's demands and continue to receive poor service. So we went to market and did a more abbreviated RFP process. The city, we worked afternoons, evenings, into the night and created a scope of work with, at that time, solid waste was housed in the Neighborhood Services Department, which is where Boulevard is at, in the Neighborhood Services Department. So we worked with them to prepare a scope of work and go through an RFP process. We put that out to the market as we normally would, and I think we got 5 proposals in from 5 waste haulers. And the proposals that came in were, they provided us a combination of their qualifications and some pricing based on providing once a week service for trash, recycling, and yard waste, as well as once a month, I think, on bulk. Okay, I got a thumbs up, so I think I said that right. And so that's what the pricing component that they submitted was based on, that level of service. So we got apples to apples pricing from all 5 proposers. We tried to see if we could split the city in half, because we didn't know if with the compressed time frame who was going to be able to mobilize for 89,000 customers to provide the whole city service. So we gave them the option, hey, do you want to, east of the turnpike and west of the turnpike? I think we cut the city down the turnpike there, and so we got proposals. Some of them submitted on both east and west districts, and then some just wanted to do the east, some just wanted to do the west. I forget the makeup of that. So, but we evaluated those proposals and then convened with a formal evaluation selection committee meeting where they evaluated the qualifications. In the procurement office, we took the apples to apples pricing and created a score for their price, an objective score for the pricing component, because that really shouldn't be subjective. Their price was their price in comparison to the other prices. So we combined the technical score for their qualifications along with the score they were given for price. And actually, the result, the committee, I think they discussed the result and actually recommended to award. They made a recommendation to negotiate with several of the firms, and because the result wasn't quite as clear cut. We talked about splitting the city, so there was that we had to take in consideration, as well as a firm that would consider doing the whole city. We had to really kind of vet that, because I'm not sure how many trucks they have to buy, how much equipment, but it's millions of dollars worth of equipment they have to buy, as well as probably acquire some real estate to house their operations in order to service the city. Currently, Waste Pro has their operations off of Selvets Road in Fort Pierce, but FCC, who is a newcomer to the area, would have had to acquire that local presence and same with any company other than Waste Management may have had stuff nearby, but they chose not to submit a proposal. So any of the companies that were proposing would have we had to kind of see what their plan was, how they were going to mobilize. I think we were evaluating these proposals in March, and we knew that the contract needed to start in September. So how are you going to, in 6 months, how are you going to acquire the equipment you need, the real estate and the operations headquarters, as well as what's your transition plan to onboard the city, to be able to service the city? So we negotiated, I think, with it may have been 3 or 4 firms. There may have been 3. That were the highest ranked, and those were grueling, like all-day negotiation sessions. Go over their plan to mobilize, their pricing structure, and I think we maybe even had a couple negotiation sessions with some of them. And so as we were going through the negotiations, there was terms and conditions that certain firms were more agreeable to and other firms were not agreeable to. And actually, I think some of the pricing changed and went higher during the negotiations, and that felt we were going in the wrong direction there. So, what seemed to come clear during the negotiations is FCC was actually able to provide us with a plan that they could service the entire city and how they were going to mobilize to do so by September. And we had I don't know if we used our consultant for that part, but we had a lot of people on this negotiation team some had solid waste experience, others had the financial experience. I think our finance team was on there. We had people in neighborhood services. We had people from the city attorney's office helping us with those negotiations on the terms. And so FCC's proposal seemed to rise to the top during negotiations. They were agreeable to meet the city a lot more in the middle, and even agree to some of the things that were more favorable to the city, where some of the other firms we were negotiating with seemed to kind of dig their heels in and kind of go back when they may have felt that they were negotiating from a position of greater strength than they actually were. And so at the end of the day, or at the end of those couple of weeks of negotiations, that we came out of there with recommending to award the contract to FCC to provide the entire city trash and recycling and yard waste collection service in bulk. And the contract was to start in September. And so, during the negotiations, we found that maybe some of the other firms didn't have, one of the firms that we were negotiating didn't actually have a realistic plan in order to start service in September. It would have been December or January before they would have been able to provide the city service. And so, but FCC, proved that they were able to do that, and I believe I think they did a pretty good job. Starting in September, I think there was a few weeks where the service was a bit shaky, but I think by October they were pretty, I don't know, you may know better, Mariana, but I think by October they were pretty much humming along.
They actually started early to
Oh,
help.
okay. Yeah. So, you're asking about why the price, we had a contract with Waste Pro for many years, and that contract was for how long? 10 years or more? 20? Yeah, a long time. And so I think initially that contract was formally solicited, but then it was renegotiated without bidding it. And I'm not, I can't speak to that, but it seems like they may have kept their price in order to keep the contract and then hit the city with price increases. Well, and then we also had, the pandemic, COVID-19, which also had a lot of upward pressure on pricing, and we were trying to hold them to the terms of the contract, but the service level just went down. And so prior to, as we were compiling the scope of work and really considering how are we going to acquire services, that's obviously stuff that had come to mind. What's the market? So we did a lot of research, our team. We surveyed, other statewide cities, like Cape Coral, Tallahassee, other cities throughout the state. What are they paying? First of all, what level of service are they getting? Are they doing once a week, twice a week? How the frequency of the services? Are they utilizing automated service where, those trucks come with those arms and pick it up? Or Waste Pro was using where they had a guy hanging off the back of the truck, and you have a person go there and assisting with the collection, not an automated collection. So we tried to identify the trends, and then the trends not only in the type of service being automated, and also the level and frequency of service, and then we also compared that to the price. And I think any way you sliced it, the price was going to go up. And then if we maintained the twice a week service, the price was going to be even higher than it is now. And it's just the unfortunate situation that was in. The pricing on that contract may have been too low, but they weren't really negotiating in good faith and holding up their end of the deal. And kind of got forced into that situation. But there was a lot of research and that went into that when we, you may recall, there was a solid waste task force established in late 2022 that actually worked with the city to get the residents' perspective on the level of service that would be palatable for the residents to be able to receive. And they had to, they had to go through that with us and understand the circumstances in the marketplace at that time and helped guide us as to how we created the scope of work for the RFP that we issued. So we did get considerable input from the community when we created that. So it's just unfortunate that it did have to go up, but I feel that we really did our best to do some research and test the market to try and get as competitive rates as we could for the city. So sorry, that took a long time.
No, it's just
I thank you for
Yeah.
the thorough explanation.
Yeah.
Because the communication in the beginning, during this period of non-performance, we suffered and we didn't get any answers.
Yeah, and
So I appreciate that
Sure.
you explained it.
And that may have been because of the ongoing litigation that they probably may not have been able to share as much as they probably would have liked because they probably weren't able to. Yes?
And I guess you also explained why you didn't get the additional service, like for twice a week.
Right, that,
I'm finding it's kind of hard having it just once a week.
I am a city resident too. I know, yeah. Yeah, I mean, because it's Florida, it's hot out, right? And now you have this big 96-gallon, if you have the 96-gallon trash can and your trash is sitting there twice as long as it used to be. And right, so, and you've got to plan differently how you're going to, maybe you are more, you do more recycling because you gotta spend time breaking down stuff more to fit it in the trash can.
And there are some people who are putting their trash out earlier in the week.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are not very happy about having those cans out outside because it was getting a little too much in their garage.
Exactly.
Right.
Oh, yeah, we know.
I think we got another question over there.
let's go ahead and take one last question. So go ahead there.
What about small, medium companies? And do they have any priorities in this procurement process or
Say, what type of companies?
small, medium companies?
Small to medium-sized companies. The city doesn't really have a formal small business program set up. However, in the mayor's office, there is staff dedicated to business development at the city. Is Elijah part of the city university?
You will be here later. Yeah.
Okay. So there's a gentleman who can talk about some of these initiatives that come out of the city manager's office, but they try and engage with the local business community, and they work with us to do a number of things. So they try to get lists of recently awarded contracts from procurement to let the local small, medium-sized business community know, hey, what's the city contracting for? Are there subcontracting opportunities? Like construction projects, a large construction project, of course, would have subcontracting opportunities. If we're hiring an auditor to audit the city's books, there may not be a subcontracting opportunity in that type of contract, but at least we try to communicate, hey, what's the city been awarding contracts for? And then we give them the contact information to provide to the businesses to reach out to those contractors themselves and maybe establish a relationship. What I would recommend if you're in the, in construction primarily, but other fields, if it might apply, if you're tracking what things we're bidding, what projects we're bidding on our website by seeing what we have out for bid. For construction, we may have pre-bid meetings. So if you're a subcontractor, you may not be able to construct the entire project, but if you attend the pre-bid meeting, you would be able to see what general contractors are in attendance, to establish relationships with them. They're probably going to need bids from subcontractors to enable them to price up the project. So it gives you an idea of who's looking at the city's projects. So there's an opportunity there to establish relationships. We also try to work with the mayor, the city manager's office. They put on events throughout the year where they try to have, small business open houses or things like that, where they go over how to do business with the city. Procurement will always participate in those. We can, talk to individuals, who attend more one-on-one and go over some of the things we're buying, we have recently or have upcoming, go over those types of projects, go over the process and how to, increase your chances of being selected or how to do business with the city. So those are some, a few ways in order that we support small, medium businesses locally. Mariana, you had your hand up. Was there something you wanted to add to that? Oh, that's out at McCarty Ranch, at those water control areas. Yeah.
All right, so we're actually just out of time. So I just want to commend Nate and your team for being here tonight. And going back to the solid waste procurement process that you summarized, I think you summarized it perfectly. I don't think I could have done that. So I really appreciate you taking the time to really stand up here and do that for the group here. So I just want to commend you for doing that. All right, everyone. So I'm sure you guys are probably hungry at this point, right? So we actually, we do have food for you guys in the back, of course, for you guys. I just want to give a quick shout out to Jersey Mike's, which is just located off of Port St. Lucie Boulevard, right by the Turnpike interchange there. They actually were our sponsor for tonight's food. So if you guys have never been there, I certainly encourage you guys to visit Jersey Mike's there off of PSL Boulevard. So let's go ahead and take a 20-minute break. We'll reconvene at 7:20. Let's go ahead and let this side of the room go first and grab your food, and then we'll come back at 7:20 for our last presentation. All right, everyone, we are officially back for our final speaker for tonight's session number 2. We're going to go ahead and get started and hopefully get you guys out of here by 8 p.m. But to round us out for tonight's session, we have our very own finance department. And the financial management department really manages our accounting and financial reporting. It also manages tax, payroll, debt, and investment administration, treasury and internal banking, grants, and external audit. And to speak a little bit more about that, we have our Deputy Director for Finance Department is Karen Russell. Welcome, Karen.
Good evening. So Ivy told you she has 38 years here with the city. So I've been with the city since 2019, but I have over 32 years in government finance. So she started at 4, I started about 2. I would say 0, but that'd be pushing it. But I've been in government a long time, so I am one of the deputy directors in finance. There are 3 of us that are deputy directors. We all report to the finance director treasurer, who handles everything for the city. We have different responsibilities. So what is our mission? Right now, we're in the process of revising our mission, but right now it's to provide exceptional municipal services that are responsive to our community while planning for smart and balanced growth that is managed in a financially responsible manner. What do we do? So we are responsible for financial reporting and operations. We do citywide grant administration, accounting, and monitoring of those funds. We're responsible for capital assets, business taxes, lien services, special assessments, accounts payable, P-card transactions, retirement, and payroll. We're also responsible for the production of the annual financial report, and we're regulated by Florida Statute 218.32, 218.33, and 218.39. Our annual financial report is available to the general public. It is audited, and it is on the city's website. So where you look for the departments, where they showed you, you go to the government, you go to the department, you pull up financial, and you can see the city's annual comprehensive financial report. I'm used to walking around. I teach also at the college, so I'm used to walking around. I don't like standing behind a podium. It's kind of weird. So we're also responsible for the cash, the investments, the debt management, And we also function as the city's internal bank. So we have departments that need services, so they'll pay by Visa to a vendor or they'll request a check. So we're kind of like that internal bank account. So our department issues all the checks to everybody. So there's a checks and balances between the department. So OMB goes and does the ad valorem piece, gets the money, right? And then we also do grants, we do other things to get money into the organization. We also manage and maintain the city's liquidity, so it's important that we have liquid assets, things that when we get ready to pay debt off or we get ready to pay bills, that we have enough in our checking account to pay those bills. If we're not using those funds, we're actually investing those funds so that we can make investments, we can make interest off of it and save from charging you more taxes, correct? Because that's how we do. We have to provide you with services. We're committed to increasing the investment portfolio, and we manage it by doing safety and returns on that portfolio. We are also responsible for the debt administration and investor relations, and on those, we're regulated by Florida Statute 125.013 and Statute 218.415. We also have a city-directed council policy for our investments. We take that to them every single year. And we're hoping to get it accredited by an organization to make sure that we're in compliance with state statute, with what our council also wants. On a tactical level, we develop procedures that govern how daily transactions are processed, and we perform a monthly financial close. So as large organizations, some will not close monthly, but we strive to close monthly because it's easier to catch errors if you're closing your books monthly versus trying to do it at the end of a fiscal year where you're waiting 12 months and then trying to figure out where the problem happened. On a strategic level, we capture and organize information for financial planning and analysis. So we take stuff to council so that they see what the financial plan is and the analysis, and then they can make informed decisions. Finance department is the only department that's audited by an independent certified public accounting firm each and every year. So when they do our audit, it goes onto the website, so it's available to the public. And that way you know that your taxpayer dollars are being managed properly and that we have internal controls to make sure that your money is not lost. And then we say, oops, we don't know what happened to the money. So they audit us and they make sure that we're following the policies that we actually put in place, that the council puts in place. So you have council-directed policies, but you also have management-directed policies. So the council puts in certain things like the investment policy, things like that. We may put in place travel policies, right? Because our departments, we're kind of decentralized. Some organizations are centralized where the accounting department does everything. Here, the departments are large enough, right? Because you have some of the departments have large budgets and they do the stuff in their departments and then it flows through our department. And then we're like that checks and balance for them. An audit is an independent assessment of our operations, including our internal controls over the span of influence. The finance department is the city's gatekeeper and watchdog. The focus is upon establishing effective internal control systems over fiscal operations, and implementing strong internal controls requires a balancing act. So remember, when you put an internal control in place, we have to look at the cost of establishing the control and the benefit of that control. So although people go, why don't you have a control on that? You should have a control on everything that you do. Sometimes you have to weigh the cost benefit. So if we have the risk of losing $2 and we have a $700 million budget, right? We're not gonna put a $10,000 control on an item where something might lose $1 or $2 or something trivial, right? So we look at what is the risk. So we have to evaluate risk, and we have other things that we look at to say, should we put a control in place? Because before we put it, we have to think, how much are we paying for that control? And what's the likelihood that it might occur? right? So if you have something that's heavily regulated, things that need to be managed really heavy, grants, right? So we want to make sure that we're in compliance with grants because that's money to the organization. That's huge money to us. If we don't monitor those grants, we can lose money, right? So we want to make sure that we put controls in place on those kind of items and things where there's a risk and a benefit at the same time, but it's not too costly. The focus is to remove the control of the asset from the accounting of the asset. So we reevaluate all functional areas to strengthen controls. Cash handling improvements is one thing, right? So we don't want the person who's collecting your cash, maybe in utilities, right? So if you pay a utility bill, we don't want that utility person collecting your cash, posting your cash, taking everything and taking it to the bank, right? So we need those controls in place so that we make sure your money gets posted to your account and not pocketed by somebody. So we put controls in place for those kind of things. One of our goals is to keep the city off the front page of the newspaper by ensuring the integrity of operations. Who wants to be on the front page of the newspaper? Not me. And I'm sure my boss doesn't want to either. And he's going to be calling on some people if we are. And I'm sure the city council will be too. The short-term goal is to improve processes by utilizing technology. So we're really using our financial software to really track projects, to track grants. We're trying to have our departments get more into putting everything that when our auditors come in, everything's in one place for them. They're not having to go, oh, let me go to so-and-so to get that. Oh, sorry, they're off. So now what happens to our audit? It stops. What happens to the cost? It goes up. Or they start monitoring other things that they didn't plan to do because now you didn't get them what they needed, so they're going on a different road than the one they were on. To date, this was before they saved about $350,000 and in excess of 8,500 employee hours through technology. So we continue with our process. We have an executive project manager who works on the financial to kind of get departments to utilize all those so that we're more tech savvy and not so paper centric. So we're trying to not kill trees. The finance department functions. We do general ledger accounting, financial reporting, payroll and retirement, accounts payable, grant monitoring. We do bonds, so we do the accounting for the bonds, the issuing, working with the city manager, OMB, working together, making sure the payments, making sure that we're in compliance with our bonds. We have an investment program. We do billing for services. We have a purchasing card program. We have a cash collection. And we do internal control system development. Here's our copy of the payments process by either payroll, accounts payable, and if you see in 21-22, we had about 80,922, and then 79,000 and something so far as of September the 5th. So we do a lot of invoice processing, a lot of payroll, a lot of different entries that we do. Here's our business tax receipts. So business tax, so if you open a business, you do anything like that, you would come to our office, they do the business tax, so they would handle all your stuff there for opening a business. We have a special assessment property tax section, right? So when you look at that bottom, the non-ad valorem piece, that gets done by our office. We don't set your rate. That's given to us. We just make sure it gets put onto your property notice so that it's on your bill. And that's for stormwater, street lights, solid waste, city water, sewer, and developer special assessment districts, so like the CDDs. So they give us the information, it gets vetted by our office, and it gets posted onto your stuff. Here is our cash and investments. So one of my roles, so there's 3 deputy directors, right? So, and I'll tell you what each of our roles are, but I'll go ahead and tell you mine. So I handle the city's cash and investments with the finance director, city treasurer. So I work with him. We manage the city's investments. Currently, as of June the 30th, when we did our report, we had over $554 million in assets. So we manage those on top of everything else that we do. And I'm also over the grants section. And I handle the investments, the grants, and the retirement section. The retirement section has the police defined benefit, which is separate. It has somebody who's over that area, and she reports to the director. I handle the retirement for all general employees who have a 401. So we manage that, and that's what I handle. So that's outside of these investments. So these investments are actually city funds, your tax dollars, our bonds, anything where we get money that we don't need it today, right? Who's paying out $554 million today? We're not. So we're investing those assets, making money, and we stay in, yes.
What's the duration period?
So we have two. So we have a,
CDs or the treasuries, U.S. treasuries, are you doing like 3 months, 6 months, years? Are you staggering them out?
so we actually stagger our portfolio, and we have a 1 to 3 year, but we just went to a 1 to 5. So we have 1 to 3 is usually managed in-house, and now our 3 to 5, we have an investment manager group that's actually doing that, because the longer you go, you really have to be in the market, and we're not in the market every day.
You don't have anything under a year?
So we do. We might do a 6-month CD. We call around to the banks. Depends on what the market is at the time, right?
6 months are paying almost as much as a year.
Right. So what we do.
0.3% difference.
Yeah. So we'll call around. We have somebody in our office that calls around to the banks and says, hey, what are you offering today? And then she may call 4 or 5 different banks. And then we go, okay, we're going to lock that rate in. And then we have some that are staggered year to year. So we have one that wipes off, and they'll call us, say, your 1 year is going away, what do you want to do, another year? And we may do a year, and we try to keep that laddered out. But then we have our longer term portfolio, so for our debt issuance, things like that we don't need the money today, because a project might be 3 years to do it. So we're trying to have that invested, put away, right? And then we can have the money to do our projects.
Is any insurance instruments as well?
No, these are usually the list of ours that we're authorized to do. So anything here we're authorized to do. Some of them have zero. So somebody had asked me earlier when we were looking at the PowerPoint before you came here, and they said, well, why do some of them have zeros? Because right now we don't have anything in those instruments. We're trying to look at our qualified public depositories. We're looking at our bank CDs. We do a variety of different things. So, and like I said, we do have an outside firm that actually helps manage our longer term portfolio. We use PFM. No, not PFM, Public Trust, sorry. PFM is our debt people. Public Trust is the one. So we went out for bid, and we hired 2 firms, and right now we're using one, and the other one's on hold till we get ready to put more money away once we start collecting more ad valorem and different things like that.
Is that on an annual basis or quarterly, or that's funds come in on quarterly or annual?
So we monitor it all the time. It's done all the time.
As far as new funds,
So usually funds are coming in from ad valorem, which is annual, right? So most of your ad valorem starts coming in that December area, right? Somewhere in there is when we start, and then it starts getting heavy, and then it goes away for a little bit. It kind of trickles down. But then we have grant funds that come in. We have bonds that we might close on. There's different things that happen all the time. It's moving all the time.
very end of the year,
So we marked.
end of the year, so it's marked out.
Yeah, so we mark to market them. We have to by generally accepted accounting principles and stuff, so we mark to market everything.
Otherwise, it's a mess.
Yeah, and so then we also, we meet with the city manager every quarter. So by statute, we have to have our city council at least know about what's going on. So we meet with our city manager. He meets quarterly with us and the investment team. And then we present to council at our workshops. So we do that twice during the year. So we do it in February and then again in July, somewhere in that area. So we're always keeping them involved. We give them memos to the city council so they know at any given time what our money's doing. This is the city's long-term debt. So the city, the debt must be approved by council. Debt proceeds are used for major capital projects or refunding of existing debt, right? So when interest rates were really low and you could get them really low, we were refunding just like you refund your house, correct? So if you're paying 5%, you can get it for 2%, you're gonna go, right? You're gonna go save. The reason people do debt, so it's not a four-letter word like our boss would say. It's not bad, right? So what happens is debt is usually issued so that the people who are using it over time are charged. So if you went and we paid cash for everything, it's the current person who's paying on it. So what we do is when we do a bond, we want it to go where it's hitting the people who are using it. So when you're long gone, the people after you are still paying it because now they might have your house, right? So they might be paying on the assessment you had, your non-ad valorem, things like that.
Is the government, the city debt rate, is that based off of LIBOR or off the 10-year, or how do they do that? Is it on the SBA? Assumption rate formula?
I'm not really sure. Stephen, he's asking about how, you were asking about what? Oh, he wants to know the debt ratings, how they're calculated out. So we use a rating agency. There's a rating agency that does it.
Yes, I understand that, but is it based on, is it pegged to LIBOR?
He wants to know if it's LIBOR.
Pegged to the 10-year, what was it pegged against?
He wants to know what it's pegged against. The interest rate that we're paying?
That's being charged to the constituents of the city.
So you're asking about the debt ratings, how, when they get our debt ratings, they use it when they look at how much money we have, how much is pledged for that revenue? Is that what you're asking?
No.
Okay.
So you're putting up a bond,
Right?
right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the taxpayers are paying for that bond, correct?
Mm-hmm. So you're talking about like utility bonds or things of that nature?
Yeah, all those different bonds.
Okay.
For the city. So what is the rate, what is the interest rate that's being charged?
Well, the interest rate varies by the debt. So utilities, they may look at that because it's taking collections from people where general obligation bond might pledge other revenue, right? So the rate just depends, and it depends on the Fitch rating or the S&P rating that we get.
That's a rating though, that's not the interest rate at which is being charged. Or
Right, so all of our bonds have different interest rates. They're not all charged the same rate. But when we go out to issue a bond, right, the market, what's going on in the market.
So yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Based on that, what is the determining factor on what that rate is? Because is it based off what LIBOR is doing, or 10-year, or what is it pegged to?
Oh, yeah, it depends on the term of the bond itself. So, for instance, some of the institutions that bid on these bonds, right, may base it off the 20-year treasury or the 30-year treasury. So it really depends on the time when the bond is issued, but also market conditions. So they're looking at a holistic approach. So it's not just based off of a 10-year note or a 20-year note.
So these city bonds are, the duration period are 20 years out?
Yes. Most of the time, it's 20 years or 30 years, and it's based on the project and the infrastructure or whatever we're using it for. So it's based on the useful life of that. Yeah. Thanks.
Way off of what everybody else is learning on. Thanks.
That's our finance director. He's the one who handles the debt. I handle the investments.
Steven, thank you.
He handles the debt. So here, the city's bond rating increased from the prior year, so we put those numbers out there. And our Annual financial report received the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting, and we got that for our report for September 30th of 2021, and we believe that we will get it again in 2022. And this is the 31st, and I think I did that wrong. When I did that, it said 30th, it's 31st. Sorry, my typo. Consecutive year the city's received the Certificate of Achievement. So we've received it for 31 years so far. And budget also gets their award, and they get it every year too. So they have a budget award. We have a financial statement award. So when they review ours, it's reviewed by independent people. They make a decision. There's usually 3 people who review it. I used to be a Certificate of Achievement I would review them. So our Government Finance Officers Association has people who review other people's financials. Can't review them in the state that you're in, so I would review them for other states. They would send them to me, I would review them. Same thing, people look for, you know, if you say you got net position, is your is your income statement matching your financial your balance sheet when it rolls up. So they're looking at different things, different numbers that may not be matched. And so here is our department as a whole. We have treasury, accounts payable, accounts receivable, capital assets, grant administration, P-card administration, business tax, lien services, ERP management, police pension, retirement, special assessments, payroll, debt management, and investments. So I do the grant administration, I do the investments, and I do the retirement piece. And then our other deputy director, she does the treasury, accounts payable, accounts receivable, capital assets, P-card. She does anything GL related, right? So if it's in our general ledger, she's the one who's responsible. And then we have another deputy director, and he's over business tax and lien services and the ERP management. Yes?
What is P-card?
Purchasing card, so it's like a Visa credit card. So it's a P-card, it's, purchases versus, so they're not allowed to just go buy food on it or anything like that. There's restrictions that it's locked from them purchasing items that are not items that normally a government would purchase. So they can't just go buy anything. And we have WEX cards for gas so that we can get the best rates on things. So, and that is our department. So any questions? You already asked, and I had to defer to my boss.
No other questions for Karen? Well, thank you, Karen.
All right, because I'm the one who kept you after you ate.
Thank you so much. Awesome. Great work.
Look, I'm going to take your little clicker.
You can take it. It's fine. I don't need it. All right, everyone. Well, we are at the end of the night. I'm going to just go over our agenda for next week. All right, so just a quick heads up. I'll turn this mic off here since I'm not used to. It's just a quick heads up. Next week's gonna be one of our longer sessions, so we probably will stay until 8:30 next week. So just as a FYI, you will hear from our Human Resources Department. Does anyone want to come work for the city? Maybe? No? Well, you'll get a chance to hear from them. You'll also get a chance to hear from our city clerk's office, risk management, information technology, and then you'll also get a special presentation on our One PSL program as well. So be on the lookout for that. We are going to meet here in this exact same room next Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. So otherwise, thank you guys for being here, and we will go ahead and adjourn. You're welcome. Thank you.